Alex, I whispered, you know how much I love you, right? Of course, he replied, stepping even closer. I love you too, more than you realize. My pulse quickened. This wasn't how a mother and son were supposed to talk or look at each other. My mind screamed at me to step back, to put some distance between us, but my body felt frozen in place. It was a serene evening in our high-rise apartment, the sun setting behind the skyline of the bustling city, casting a warm golden glow over the towering buildings. I stood in the sleek kitchen, preparing dinner while the soft melodies of a classical piano piece floated through the air. My son, Alex, had just returned home from his first year at university, and the apartment felt alive with a comforting energy that only family could bring. Alex was no longer the little boy who used to play with Legos on the living room floor. At 19, he had transformed into a tall, confident young man, pursuing his dream of becoming a graphic designer. I marveled at how quickly he had grown up. It felt like just yesterday he was a curious child, asking endless questions about everything around him. Now, he was a young adult, navigating his own world, and I was still adjusting to this new dynamic between us. Dinner was almost ready, and I called out to him from the living room. As we sat down at the dining table, I noticed the way he looked at me, intensely, almost as if he were searching for something in my eyes. I brushed it off, thinking it was just my imagination. We chatted about his classes, his friends, and how much he missed home, but there was something in the way he spoke, the way his gaze lingered on mine, that stirred something within me. After dinner, we decided to watch a movie together, a tradition we used to cherish before he left for school. The living room felt cozier than usual, the dim lighting and plush sofa creating a perfect atmosphere for a quiet night in. I found myself stealing glances at him, noticing the man he had become. Just as I began to feel an unsettling tension in the air, he shifted closer to me on the couch. At first, it seemed innocent, but then his hand brushed against mine. A spark shot through me, something electric, something I knew I shouldn't feel. I quickly pulled my hand away, startled by the intensity of the moment. What's wrong, Mom? He asked, his voice soft, laced with concern. My heart raced, unsure of how to respond. Nothing, sweetie. Just tired, I replied, trying to dismiss the tension while hoping he hadn't noticed. But deep down, I knew something had changed in that moment. Something we couldn't ignore. The line between mother and son had blurred, and even though we hadn't crossed it, the air was thick with unspoken thoughts. We sat in silence, the movie playing in the background, but neither of us was paying attention anymore. I excused myself, saying I needed to go to bed early, but as I walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between us. That night, I lay in bed, my mind racing. I knew I couldn't let this feeling grow. I had to keep my distance for both our sakes. But deep down, I wasn't sure how. The next morning, I woke up feeling unsettled, replaying the events of the previous night in my mind. I tried to convince myself it was all in my head. I was his mother. Nothing more, nothing less. When I came downstairs, Alex was already awake, sitting at the kitchen island with a cup of coffee. He greeted me with a smile, as if nothing had happened. Maybe it really was nothing, just an odd moment that only I had noticed. Morning, I said, forcing a smile. Morning, Mom, he replied casually. I was thinking about going for a walk in the park later. Want to join me? A walk? It had been ages since we'd done anything like that together. I hesitated, unsure if I should spend more time alone with him after the way I felt last night. But then I reminded myself it was just a mother and son spending time together. There was nothing wrong with that. Sure, I said, that sounds nice. Later that afternoon, we strolled through a nearby park, the sun shining brightly and the air filled with the scent of blooming flowers. For a moment, everything felt normal. We walked side by side, talking about nothing in particular. Old memories, his plans for the future, the usual small talk. I found myself laughing, feeling more at ease with him, thinking maybe I had overreacted the night before. But as we walked deeper into the park, there were moments where our conversation paused, leaving a lingering silence that felt heavier than it should. At one point, we reached a quiet spot by the lake, where the water shimmered under the sunlight. Alex turned to me, his expression serious. You've always been there for me, Mom, he said, his voice soft but earnest. I don't know what I'd do without you. There was something in his tone that caught me off guard, a vulnerability that made my heart ache. I smiled, trying to lighten the mood. "Well, you won't have to worry about that anytime soon," I joked. "I'm not going anywhere." But he didn't laugh. Instead, he took a step closer, his eyes locking onto mine. "No, I mean it," he continued. "You've always been more than just my mom. You've been everything." I froze. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning I wasn't ready to face. I searched his face for some sign that he was just being sentimental, that this was an innocent moment of affection. But there was something in his eyes that made my heart race again, just like the night before. "Alex," I whispered, "you know how much I love you, right?" "Of course," he replied, stepping even closer. "I love you too, more than you realize." My Pulse quickened. This wasn't how a mother and son were supposed to talk or look at each other. My mind screamed at me to step back, to put some distance between us, but my body felt frozen in place. "I think we should head back," I said, my voice shaky. "It's getting late." But before I could turn away, he reached out and gently took my hand. The touch was innocent enough, but the way he held on, the way his thumb brushed against my skin, made my stomach twist in a way I couldn't ignore. "Mom," he said softly, his voice filled with something I couldn't quite name. "I don't know how to say this, but I've been feeling something. Something I shouldn't. And I think you felt it too." Panic surged through me. I pulled my hand away, taking a step back, my heart pounding in my chest. "Alex, stop," I said, my voice trembling. "You don't mean that. You're confused." He looked at me, his expression a mix of confusion and hurt. "I'm not confused, Mom. I know how I feel." "No," I said, shaking my head. "This isn't right. You're my son. We can't." I couldn't even finish the sentence. The words felt too dangerous to speak out loud. Alex took a deep breath, his face clouded with emotion. "I know it's not right, but I can't help how I feel. And I don't think you can either." Tears welled up in my eyes as I struggled to keep my composure. This wasn't happening. I had to stop this before it went any further, before we crossed a line we could never uncross. "I'm your mother," I said, my voice breaking. "And I love you, but not like that. I can't, we can't." The words hung between us, thick and suffocating. I could see the pain in his eyes, the way his shoulders slumped in defeat. He nodded slowly, looking down at the ground as if ashamed. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I didn't mean to. I didn't want to make you uncomfortable." I swallowed hard, trying to push down the overwhelming mix of emotions swirling inside me. "It's okay," I said softly, though I wasn't sure if it really was. "Let's just go home." The drive home was suffocatingly quiet. Alex didn't say a word, and neither did I. The weight of what had been said in the park hung heavily between us, making every passing second feel agonizingly long. I kept my eyes on the road, my mind racing as I tried to process what had just happened. When we finally pulled into the parking garage of our building, Alex muttered something about going to his room. I didn't stop him as he disappeared down the hall. I collapsed onto the couch, my body trembling with the emotions I had been holding back since that moment by the lake. I didn't know how to make sense of any of it. He was my son, my baby boy, but he wasn't a boy anymore, and it was becoming terrifyingly clear that our relationship had taken on a complexity we hadn't expected. I wanted to believe that his feelings were just a phase, something fleeting that would pass with time. But the way he had looked at me, the way his hand had lingered on mine, told me otherwise. A part of me felt guilty, like maybe I had done something wrong, maybe I had been too affectionate, too close over the years. But that wasn't right, was it? Mothers were supposed to love their sons, to nurture them, to be there for them. That's all I had ever done. But now, everything felt tainted by the strange tension that had grown between us, and I didn't know how to fix it. I spent the rest of the day trying to avoid him, keeping myself busy with chores and anything that could distract me from the confusion I felt. By the time evening came, I was emotionally drained. I didn't want to confront what had happened, but I knew I couldn't avoid it forever. That night, after hours of tossing and turning in bed, I heard a knock on my door. My heart sank. I knew it was him. "Mom, can I come in?" Alex's voice was soft, almost hesitant. I hesitated, my mind screaming at me to say no, to create some distance between us. But I knew I couldn't keep avoiding him. I had to face this, no matter how uncomfortable it made me. "Come in," I said quietly, sitting up in bed and pulling the covers around me as if they could shield me from the emotional storm that was about to unfold. Alex stepped inside, looking as conflicted and unsure as I felt. He stood at the edge of the room for a moment, not quite knowing what to do with himself. After a few seconds, he sat down on the edge of the bed but kept his distance. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "I shouldn't have said what I said earlier. I don't know what came over me." I nodded slowly, trying to find the right words. "I know this is confusing," I said, "but what happened earlier? That can't happen again, Alex. We have to be careful. This isn't how things are supposed to be." "I know," he whispered, his eyes downcast. "But it's so hard, Mom. I don't know why I feel like this. I've tried to push it away, but it just keeps coming back." His words struck something deep within me. I felt an overwhelming sense of sadness for him, for both of us, really. This wasn't a situation I had ever imagined myself being in, but there we were, trapped in a web of emotions that neither of us knew how to untangle. "I'm your mother," I said again, my voice gentle but firm. "That's all I can ever be. You know that, right?" He looked at me, his eyes filled with pain, but he nodded. "I know," he said. I don't want to lose you." "You're not going to lose me," I assured him. "But we have to set boundaries, Alex. This is dangerous territory." For a moment, silence hung between us. The tension from earlier in the day still lingered, but there was also an unspoken understanding that things couldn't continue the way they were. We both knew it, even if neither of us wanted to fully acknowledge it. "Maybe it's best if you go back to school tomorrow," I suggested gently. "I think we both need some space to clear our heads." Alex nodded slowly, though I could see the sadness in his eyes. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Maybe you're right." The next morning, I watched as he packed his things, the air thick with unresolved emotions. I wanted to hug him, to tell him that everything would be okay, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. Not after everything that had happened. When he finally left, the apartment felt emptier than it had in years. I sat on the couch, staring out the window, trying to process everything. I knew we had made the right choice by putting some distance between us, but that didn't make it any easier. As the days passed, I tried to settle back into my routine, but it wasn't the same. The apartment felt too quiet without Alex, and I found myself thinking about him more than I should have. I wanted to believe that the distance would help, that it would give us both the space we needed to sort out our feelings. But deep down, I knew things would never go back to the way they were before. Something had shifted between us, something we couldn't undo, and I wasn't sure what the future held for us anymore. Thank you for joining me in this story. Have you ever experienced a moment that changed the dynamics of a relationship? Share your thoughts in the comments. As the days turned into weeks, I tried to fill the void left by Alex's absence, but nothing felt quite right. I found myself scrolling through old photos, reminiscing about the times we shared. I missed our movie nights, our long talks about life and dreams. The silence in the apartment was deafening, and I often caught myself waiting for him to walk through the door, only to be met with the harsh reality of solitude. One evening, I decided to reach out to him. I sent a simple text, asking how he was doing and if he wanted to chat. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was Alex.
"I'm okay, Mom.
"Just busy with schoolwork," he replied.
I felt a pang of longing. I miss you.
"Would you like to come home for the weekend?" There was a brief pause before he responded. "I'll think about it." I hoped he would come. I wanted to see him, to talk, to reconnect. But deep down, I knew that our relationship had changed, and I wasn't sure how to navigate this new territory. What do you think Alex is feeling? Is he ready to confront the emotions that have surfaced, or is he still trying to process everything? Let me know your thoughts. The weekend arrived, and as I prepared the apartment for his visit, I felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. I wanted everything to be perfect, but I also knew that the air between us would be charged with unspoken words. When the doorbell rang, my heart raced. "Hey Mom," he said, stepping inside with a hesitant smile.
Hey, sweetheart.
"I'm so glad you're here," I replied, pulling him into a warm embrace. He felt different, almost like a stranger in my arms, yet familiar at the same time. We spent the evening catching up, sharing stories about life, school, and friends. But beneath the surface, the tension lingered. I could feel it in the way he looked at me, the way our conversations occasionally faltered, leaving room for the unsaid. Later that night, as we settled on the couch to watch a movie, I felt the familiar spark of connection. But it was laced with an underlying tension that made me anxious. As the film played, I glanced at him, and our eyes met. "Mom," he said quietly, breaking the silence. "Can we talk about what happened the last time I was home?"
My heart sank.
I had hoped we could avoid it, but I knew we couldn't. "Of course," I replied, my voice steady. "We need to talk about it." "What would you do in this situation? Would you confront the feelings head-on, or would you try to brush it under the rug? Let me know in the comments." As we spoke, I felt the weight of our emotions pressing down on us. Alex shared how confused he had been, how he had struggled to make sense of his feelings. I listened, my heart aching for him. "I never wanted to make you uncomfortable, Mom," he said, his voice breaking. I don't know how to explain it. It felt so real." "I know," I replied softly. "But we have to understand that our relationship is special, and we can't let it become something else." He nodded, tears glistening in his eyes. "I don't want to lose what we have. You mean everything to me." "And you mean everything to me," I said, reaching out to hold his hand. "But we have to set boundaries. I love you, but we need to keep this relationship healthy." The conversation was heavy, but it felt cathartic. As we talked, I could feel the tension slowly dissipating, replaced by a renewed sense of understanding. In the days that followed, we worked on rebuilding our relationship, focusing on the love and support that had always defined it. We laughed, we shared, and most importantly, we learned how to navigate the complexities of our bond. As I reflected on those moments, I realized that love is a powerful force, capable of transforming relationships in unexpected ways. While the path ahead might be challenging, I knew that with open communication and understanding, we could find our way back to the beautiful connection we once had. Thank you for watching and listening to my story. If you enjoyed it, please don't forget to subscribe for more videos like this. What do you think will happen next for Alex and me? Let me know in the comments.